Oh,
It's Friday. It is Friday, right?
yep.
Hey, it's Friday of week 6. Halfway there. If everybody would put their name and campus in the chat, that'd be great. Okay, let's just check in the rest of the students and then we'll get going. Anybody have any fun plans for the weekend? No?
I'm going to a Valentine's Day dinner with my husband for our church.
Oh, sounds great.
Yeah.
Think there's no fun plans when you're in nursing school.
Yeah, that's true.
It's study, study, study.
That's true. Yeah, this is a busy term for you guys. You're halfway there. Okay. Okay. Okay, everybody's out of the waiting room. Okay, so welcome to week 6, halfway point. Couple of things. I did turn on the homework grades. Everybody saw that yesterday. So I don't typically have a lot of issues with homework with students. I try and stay on top of you, but I just wanted to let you know that that total overall grade you're seeing now includes homework. And we need to remember, though, that at the end of the term, you still need to have a 78 between your 3 exams, your HESI, and your 5 quizzes. Have to be at a 78 before that homework kicks in. Everybody's aware of that, right?
Yes.
After looking at the homework grades yesterday, it looks like everybody went up, or most everybody went up. So that's a good thing. I'll leave those on through probably the end of next week after exams. And probably turn those off at the end of week 7. So you have a lot of things going on. Remember I told you at the beginning of the term that once we hit week 7, things start to get really busy for you guys. So I hope you're working on your assignments, right? So next week, week 7, you have your group project that's due on Wednesday evening, right? By Wednesday evening. And then you have till Sunday to respond to 2 of your peers' projects. Okay, so that's next Wednesday. Plus you have an exam. Okay, week 8, nothing major. That could be a good catch-up week. And then week 9, you have your HESI prep assignment, which hopefully, if you've been working on that all term, as we go, it should be a pretty easy assignment for you to submit. After today, almost the entire HESI prep assignment should be able to be completed. And then after today, your study guide, everything should have been covered. The concepts should have been covered that are in your study guide, since the exam next week is weeks 4, 5, and 6. So that would be week 9. And then week 10 is another exam and your vulnerable populations project. All right, so starting next week, it gets super busy. So hopefully you guys are working on your assignments. As far as exam 2 goes, we just completed 3 reviews. Dr. Ford did hers Monday. I've sent you the recording. Professor Kershaw did hers Wednesday night. I think I sent you the recording. Have I sent you that recording yet? From Professor Kershaw?
Yes.
I did. Okay, good. And then I did one this morning. I didn't have very many students, only like 5 students, 3 from other sections and then 2 of my students. So not a whole lot of participation. So I'll send out that recording later on today. I really encourage you to watch it. We went through how to tackle the study guide. And one of the most important things to remember, as I told my group this morning for exam 2, is that we're now taking knowledge and applying it to clinical practice. So most of the questions on the exam are clinical questions, right? So taking your knowledge and putting it to practice. If you have in the mental illness section, which we covered previously, that would have been in, let's see. You have a patient presenting with certain symptoms. That would have been in week 4. Clinical symptoms, what might it be? Could it be bipolar? Could it be a phobia? Could it be a generalized anxiety disorder? Ethics. If you're presented with different cultural values, beliefs, how do you apply your clinical judgment to that? So my point is that it's not about memorizing the study guide. It's about understanding it and how to apply it into a clinical setting. For example, the alcoholic, what kinds of signs and symptoms might they present with? What does withdrawal look like? What is a pregnant teen? What are concerns about pregnant teens in the clinical setting? Would it constitute an emergency? So again, it's all about applying your knowledge now to clinical decisions, right? So when you get out of nursing school, it's great to have all the knowledge, but if you can't apply it in the clinical setting, there's more work to do. Okay? Does that make sense?
Do you see my question?
No,
About the peer review. I thought we weren't doing that.
we're not. I
Oh, okay. I thought I
should have
heard you.
sent you a message a few weeks ago that said, there's no peer review. There's no peer review with this. That's meant to be in the RN section. I don't know why it's in our section, but there is no peer review.
So we're just turning in the papers next
You're
week.
just turning in the papers, and everybody has to turn in the same paper.
Yep.
Okay, everybody, because that's how it gets logged in the grade book that you've turned in something. So I realize there's going to be multiple papers that are the same. I get that, but everybody has to turn in their own paper. I've heard from groups that some students aren't participating. That's not good. So turn it, what everybody has participated with, turn that in. If there are students that are not participating, I need to know about that if they didn't contribute to the project, because if you didn't participate, you end up with a 0. Okay? So just keep communicating with me. I don't have too many issues, but I do have some issues of lack of participation. And those groups, I think, for the most part, have reached out to me and I've given them some direction. Does that make sense? What else do we want to go over before we go into content?
Real quick, I'm going to turn my camera off. I'm gonna contact Zoom because my camera's doing the same thing it did last week.
Okay. All right. So, Any questions about the remainder of the term? I'll keep sending announcements and reminding you of things, but how are you feeling so far? Feel like you're grasping community? Have you guys gotten the email yet that asks you to fill out evaluations, midterm evaluations?
No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay, so when you do, it should be coming soon. Please, if you have a minute, fill it out. I'd like to hear how you think things are going so far with regards to the class, with regards to me as your instructor. I like to get feedback so that I can make sure I'm meeting the learning needs of all of you. So I would appreciate if you would take a minute to fill that out when it comes. Okay? Week 6, this is mid-module week. So anybody that's below a 78 is having attendance issues or having homework issues. I am required to fill out weekly at-risk reports. And I think we talked about this last week. Those go to your deans, and then we have at-risk meetings with your campus every other week. So your deans are receiving weekly risk reports for those students that fall in that category. So for this week being mid-module week, I do have to fill out a mid-module assessment for all the students that are at risk, and that will go to you as well as your dean, and then it will ask you to try to set up a meeting with me to kind of go through how the first 6 weeks are going and try and come up with a success plan for the rest of the term if you're at risk. Okay. So if you get one of those from me over the weekend, please schedule a time to meet with me. I've done lots and lots and lots of tutoring sessions over the last couple of weeks, lots. And I think it's been very, very beneficial to the students. I think it really helps them to go over previous exam and what they missed and what concepts they missed. And then we talk about test taking strategies and try and figure out what happened during the exam. And I'll tell you, just as a prep for next exam, what I'm finding is that a great majority of the questions that students get wrong, they're not reading the question completely. They're missing priority words, cues, priority phrases. So I would really, really ask you to be mindful of that. What do you look for in a question that would stick out, that would maybe help lead you to the right answer? What kinds of things do you look for in a question?
Like something that says like most important.
Or priority.
Yeah.
First, what's the greatest? What's the first thing you do?
Like
And then the
issues, like airway.
Safety, ABCs. You always have to think nursing process too. Don't forget your ADPI. We're essentially taking your ADPI and now applying it to the community setting. Okay, but you've got to read the questions. Take your time on the exam. You've got to read the questions completely. Every question has some kind of cue. Okay, and don't forget about the negatively asked questions, where you're looking for maybe something after you've done your teaching, you're looking for something that the client says that you know they didn't comprehend your teaching. What did they say that was incorrect, that they may need more teaching? So don't forget about those negatively worded questions. You have to read the questions slowly and pull out important words, phrases, cues, whatever. And I can't stress that enough. That's where most of the errors are happening. I'm going to send you guys out some additional math resources this afternoon. Professor Bogart from PEDS is a math guru, and she has her own YouTube channel. And anybody have her for PEDS?
I do.
Yes.
I do.
So have you guys seen her math resources?
No, I haven't seen them.
Okay, I'm going to send them out to you today. But I also, in reviewing with students, the math questions they got wrong, these were just mental errors. Okay, these are easy math questions or easy conversions. Okay, they're easy equation setups. So again, just taking your time, reading the question. And remember, any information that's not in the question doesn't exist. So if you're overthinking the question, all the information you need to pick the right answer is in the question. It's not in the question, it doesn't exist. So all those what if, well, what if this was going on? What if? No, it's not there. Okay?
Mhm.
So just please remember that. Take your time. You have 75 minutes. Take your time. And then the other last thing about the exam is if you do all your due diligence and study and prepare and feel comfortable, go into the exam with confidence. Go in saying, I got this. Got this. You prepare. You know if you prepared adequately. And then if after doing your review of the study guide and review of all the content, if there's still things that you're struggling with from the study guide, set up an appointment with me next week. Okay, and we'll go over whatever's left that you're still having a hard time understanding. Okay, so I offer that to all of you. I offer that to all of my students before you take an exam. If there's still some things you're struggling with, reach out to me. Okay. What else? Other questions? All right. What are we covering today? Topics are we covering today?
Occupational and environmental health.
Okay. What else? And did you find your occupational and environmental health readings this week?
In the module.
That's where those two topics are covered this week in the module and those teaching pages. Okay, so please review those. As far as your education, communication in the nurse-patient relationship, patient education, health promotion, that was chapter 9 in fundamentals. And then there were 4 pages in chapter 8 with regards to the nurse-patient relationship. So don't forget to review those. Okay. Let's start with occupational health. What is occupational health? What do you, if you're an occupational health nurse, where are you? What are you doing? Where are you working? Big part of community nursing. Does anybody have where they work? Do you guys have an occupational health nurse or an occupational health department?
They work in the hospitals or the nursing homes, I guess.
They what?
Work in the hospitals or the nursing homes.
Occupational health is the workplace. All right. The occupational health is responsible for maintaining health and safety in the workplace. Everybody, irregardless of where you work, have occupational health safety guidelines. Whether you work in a bank, whether you work in a fast food place, whether you work in a hospital, long-term care, anywhere, every place of business has occupational health safety guidelines. Has anybody ever heard of OSHA? Anybody ever have to be part of the team that gets prepared for an OSHA visit? Occupational Safety and Health Administration. That's what OSHA is. What is OSHA? Why will they visit you in your workplace?
To make sure you're cleaning and sanitizing and giving care properly.
That's
Make
part
sure
of it.
there's not any hazards. You have your proper hazard signs and your fire extinguishers where they're supposed to be. They come and check to make sure you're using the right chemicals to wash dishes and clean room.
Excellent. They make sure everything's stored properly because OSHA, the occupational and safety guidelines have been established for every working environment. Okay, there's really no safe work environment. Some are at high risk than others, but there's really no safe work environment. Certain places have much more higher risk, right? Say industrial plants, right? That provide additional risks. But that occupational nurse or team or department is responsible for implementing the safety guidelines that have been developed for that place of business. So when OSHA comes, they can come for one or two reasons. One is they're coming for a visit, and OSHA can come unannounced. They're coming for a visit to make sure all your safety guidelines are in place. Or let's say there's been an accident or a chemical spill, or maybe a patient died unexpectedly in the OR, increase in falls. Every workplace issue, whether it's patient or employee related, has to be reported. And if you've ever been part of an OSHA visit, it's very, very stressful. Okay. So occupational health nursing delivers health and safety programs to workers. All right. It primarily focuses on the promotion and restoration of health, prevention of illness and injury, and protection from work-related risks. So the occupational nurse, think about it. Let's just take a hospital. Think of all the different roles that people have in a hospital. From food service to maintenance to OR to X-ray to radiology to just think of all the different job descriptions in a hospital. The occupational health department nurse has to make sure that she's familiar with all these job descriptions and what risks come with each job description. The occupational nurse's role is a huge part of the healthcare team. Obviously, the goal is to keep people at work, minimize injury, minimize risk, proper training. Has anybody been ever hired by a new employer and you have to go through all the safety trainings? That's occupational health. They need to make sure that you are able to perform your job duties in a safe way. Prevention of illness and injuries. Monitoring, these nurses monitor for hazards in the work environment. What if you're working in an environment that has toxic chemicals? What if you're working in an environment that's super noisy in a plant? What if you're working in an environment that you're standing all day? Or what if something in your job description says that you lift heavy things all day? What about temperature extremes? You might work in an environment that's extremely cold, extremely hot. You may work with radiation, electricity, crowded work environments. And then what about psychological issues? What about stress, burnout, substance abuse, workers with chronic conditions? I mean, think about it. It's estimated we spend 1/3 of our life at work. So think of all the things and issues and risks and problems that could happen at work or that people bring to work. Right? So the occupational health nurse doesn't, I mean, a big part of her job is to keep people safe, training, but a lot of their job is intervention. Right? What if you have a worker that after every shift, they come to you and say, my back is killing me. And it only happens after my shift. When I go home, I'm okay. What might that lead you to believe? If they're lifting all day and it's part of their job description, maybe they're not lifting in the right way. Maybe they're using bad body mechanics and they need some reteaching. I mean, the goal is to prevent injury. How do we get people back to work after they've been injured? I mean, we've all heard about coming back on limited duty or maybe go in another role until you can get back into your regular job. That's all what occupational health does. If somebody's hurt on the job, they act as a case manager. What resources do these people need to get back to work? What's a risk of high noise level?
You can lose your hearing.
Lose your hearing. So the occupational nurse may do hearing screenings. Back pain, common complaint due to lifting. What about PPE? Every work site should have protective equipment available for any kind of hazards that exist. What if there's a spill of something? How do we protect our workers? Hearing protection, eye guards, protective clothing. How do we monitor the levels of radiation and exposures? Let's say in the radiation department of a hospital. Let's talk about primary, secondary, and tertiary. What would be some primary interventions that an occupational nurse may do? Now that you know about occupational health nursing.
Wear gloves.
Okay.
Make sure you have their proper signs put out.
Mhm. Remember, primary is preventing anything before it happens.
Maybe give out pamphlets about like lifting, how to lift properly.
Yep. What about your new employee training? What about that annual training that you have to go to every year in your and wherever you work? Preventing something before it happens. Okay, so occupational nurses are involved in a lot of education to prevent something before it happens. Safe lifting, safe handling of chemicals, making sure you have all your vaccines or shots before you start work.
Preventing needle sticks.
Preventing needle sticks. Absolutely. So the occupational nurse has a big role in the primary prevention area. Their job is to have you well prepared before you go into the workplace so that you minimize the risk of injury, illness. Also, on another note for occupational nurses, they do a lot of health promotion. Maybe they do support groups for obese clients or exercise, healthy living seminars, healthy eating seminars. right? This is all to keep people at work in the workplace. Okay? What about the people that come to work with lots of personal issues that may be affecting their job performance? What if they're handling heavy equipment? What if they're taking care of patients? They're impacted with mental health issues, with substance abuse issues. I mean, think of all that can happen in a workplace. Does that make sense? Lots and lots of things to be mindful of in the workplace. And I'm sure a lot of you, pardon me, participate in disaster drills. Right? I think it's mandatory now in working in workplaces that there are disaster drills. And that's for the health and safety of everybody. We did drills in schools twice a year. And think about schools. Think about all the things that could go wrong at schools with injuries and kids getting into things, and high schools and chemistry labs and physics labs and all the things they use. There's just a lot to think about. Okay. Let me make sure I covered everything I wanted to with occupational health. Nurse conducts assessments of the workplace to learn about workplace processes and what materials are in the workplace. We talked about this a little bit, the requirements of various jobs. What's the actual and potential hazards to all these jobs? We talked about that. Okay. Let's move to environmental health. What's environmental health? Or let's say, what's environmental risks, environmental health? What is that? Think about where you live right now. Think about everything in the environment that is a potential risk. When we think about environmental risks, we think about air pollution, water contamination, soil contamination, food contamination. What if you live near an airport? I live near a major highway going right through Colorado. It goes to the East Coast and the West Coast. I live close enough where I can hear trucks coming down the hill, putting on their brakes, coming out of the mountains. What if you live near highways, transportation hubs? What if you live near an industrial site, a waste site, nuclear power plant? Think of all the different risks you have in your environment. What if you live in a place where there's high poverty, high crime, lots of violence, maybe gang activity? Live in crowded conditions or close to each other. What kinds of risks do you have in your own environments? I'm asking. What are some other risks? Think of where you live now. What are your to me, I take for granted. It's terrible. I take for granted that the air I breathe is safe. The water I drink is safe. That when I go to a restaurant or fast food, that I just take for granted everybody's doing their job, preparing the food adequately, cleanliness. I shouldn't take that for granted, but I do. What are some risks you guys have in your environment that we haven't talked about? Potential risks.
The pesticides whenever you live close to fields and stuff.
Exactly. What if you live near farms and agriculture where pesticides are being sprayed or used? Think about everything you have in your house right now. Cleaning supplies. Or you do lawn and garden and you have all your lawn and garden supplies. Those are environmental risks. What else? Does anybody live in environments that have high risk? What about if you live near a waste site? Look what's going on in Ohio right now. Everybody heard about that? Think about it.
I haven't.
There was a chemical spill from a train. And that chemicals were lit on fire to, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? To get rid of the noxious chemicals. Well, now it's kind of questionable about the air quality, the water contamination in this small rural town in Ohio. It's been all over the news for about a week. That's an environmental disaster. Anybody ever see the movie Erin Brockovich? We all know what that's about if you saw it. Water contamination into a community that people started developing cancer and rare cancers at all ages from the water contamination. Environmental health is pretty big in community and public health nursing. So what can we do to reduce our risks? Well, hang on. Environmental hazards are responsible for over 1/2 of the total burden of disease in the world. That's pretty amazing. Contribute to over 80% of communicable and non-communicable diseases and injuries. Environmental health is determined by genetics, socioeconomic status, and environmental exposures. Like I said, what if you live in a community that has a high poverty? What barriers do you face?
Gun violence, bad food.
Crowded living conditions, exposure to diseases, living close to hazardous waste, having poor quality foods, exactly. What about lead-based paint? Kind of a big deal. What do we do about lead-based paint? Let's say you're doing a nursing, let's say you're doing an assessment with a family. How old is their house? Is the house paint have lead in it? What about schools kids go to? Are they older schools that may have lead-based paint? What do we know about kids and environmental hazards? Pretty susceptible. Kids are the most at risk for environmental injuries. Why is that? I don't want to talk the whole time. Why are kids at risk for environmental injuries? A couple of reasons, a couple of big reasons.
Accidents, like being left alone by themselves. They just don't know, like they like to play with certain things.
They put everything in their mouths.
Everything is an experiment.
Mhm. Maybe their immune systems aren't quite fully developed yet, so their risk of exposure.
All right.
right? So when you're doing environmental risk assessments with families, where they live, where they work, where they go to school, or where they send their kids to school, what's their dietary practices? Do they eat a lot of fish? Why would you even care about that? Why would you care if they have a diet high in fish?
Mercury fish.
Mercury exposure, right? Where do they get their fish? They get it from the supermarket, or they get it from the stream or the river that they live near? And is that water healthy?
No.
Okay. Talked about lead-based paint. We talked about pesticides used in homes, schools, daycares, hospitals, lawn care, farms. What about exposure to toxic chemicals for, say, a pregnant woman? Right? Potentially disastrous with miscarriages, stillbirth, or maybe developmental delays in the child. So we have to be very mindful of environmental risks and exposures for our pregnant client. $30 million Americans drink water that does not meet the EPA's safe drinking water. That's a lot. 50% of Americans live in areas where the air quality does not meet the standards. I bet I'm one of them, living close to a big highway with trucks after trucks after trucks. It's the major thoroughfare from East Coast to West Coast for trucking. What about food contaminants? I mean, think about it. Salmonella in chicken. And that was what your discussion, have you guys done the discussion? You guys, you haven't done the discussion question about the outbreak? Okay. Consumer confidence reports, what do we know about them? They're called right to know reports. We as citizens have a right to know what environmental risks are in our communities. You can actually go onto the EPA. Everybody know what the EPA is? Environmental Protection Agency. They are responsible, kind of like OSHA for the workplace. EPA is responsible for environmental guidelines in every community. I may have different risks in my community than you have in your community, but we do have the right to know. You can actually go into the EPA website and put your zip code in there. In your zip code, they will give you a list of what your environmental risks are within your zip code. Okay, so a lot to think about with environmental health. We face risks every day, whether it be in our homes, where our kids go to school, in our workplaces, in the community, restaurants. Questions? Okay, let's talk about education and barriers to education. Part of what we need to know about here this week is patient education and health promotion. Okay, a lot of our role as a community health nurse is patient education. Would you agree? Actually, a lot of our role as a nurse is patient education. Doesn't really matter, I'm focusing on the community, but doesn't really matter what environment you work in, you're always doing patient education. Would you guys agree? Okay, patient education, one of the most important roles of a nurse. Why do we use education? We use education to promote health, prevent injury and illness, improve health-related behaviors, try and enable clients and families to care for one another and themselves. We know that when clients take personal responsibility for their health, they're much more effective in managing it. Right? Education empowers patients with the knowledge and motivation that helps them take personal responsibility. So we have 3 domains of learning. Does anybody know what they are? If you did your readings, you would know what they are. What are they?
Visual,
Cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. We all use all 3. But, for example, I'm a psychomotor learner. I like to do everything with my hands. If I'm trying to help a patient learn how to use their glucometer, I don't want to send them a video. I want to show them, and I need to show them with my hands. So cognitive learning is about the thinking. Okay, some people learn best by thinking, ability to hear or read information, understand it, memorize it, and then you use it later to solve problems. That's cognitive. Affective is the feeling. What are the learner's attitudes, feelings, beliefs, values? These affect their ability to learn. And then you have the psychomotor, right? So you're learning a task or skill through hands-on, through doing it. So we all have all these parts of cognitive, affective, psychomotor, but some people learn in different ways. Like I said, I'm a psychomotor learner. What are you guys? Like Tom, my husband, he is about as cognitive as it comes. He has to think through everything a gazillion times before he can make a decision. That's just the way he learns. What do you guys?
I'm a psychomotor. I like to learn hands-on.
Oh.
I'm a
Anybody else? Psychomotor, yeah. But we have to be able to read our audience. Okay, so that's the next part of this. Let's say you're doing education. Think of your nursing process. Okay, in your notes for this week, in your week 6 notes, we go through the nursing process of what you need to do at every stage of the nursing process to promote health education and learning. So if you haven't read that, I'm going to ask you to go back and read that. What I would like to talk about is what do you think? What do you need to think about? What do you need to think about when you're doing your teaching? What's important to think about? Is age important? Why is age important?
So we
Because it does depend on how
understand
they
whatever
care for
you're
themselves.
teaching me.
Yeah,
Well,
that determine how you go with the patient.
When I was in the schools, I could be doing an education program in the morning for a bunch of preschoolers and ending the day with an educational forum for high schoolers. Everybody learns differently. So age definitely plays a factor. What else do you need to assess with your group?
What they already know.
Exactly. What if you're working with a group of hearing impaired clients? What might you need to do?
Know how they communicate.
Maybe handouts. And those are your visual learners, right? What do you do with a group that's visually impaired? Or a client?
Braille. Probably Braille.
What about recordings? Videos? What about if you are trying to work with a client who's aphasic? What do you do? Anybody? What do you do with an aphasic client?
Can't you have them like point to what they want or point to stuff like on a board? Because the aphasia client, those are clients that have difficulty speaking, right?
Yeah, you
Correct.
can have them write what they want to, say since they can't say it.
Mhm. What about clients who are low in their health literacy? They have they maybe English is their second language. How do you ensure they're understanding what you're saying?
By either getting a translator or having someone that can, I'm not gonna say a family member because a family member is not a good idea, but having someone that can assist y'all with communicating with one another.
Mhm. And if there's nobody available, I don't know, maybe do pamphlets, handouts in their language, their primary language. How do you assess their understanding? I mean, this is all part of patient education. You have to know your client, know what their limitations are, know what their barriers are. One of the biggest barriers is the actual literacy. And I don't say that in a derogatory way, but there's a lot of people that are health illiterate. How do you shift your education to the health illiterate client? How do you explain things in terms that they understand? And how do you evaluate that they understand what you said?
You can ask them questions about it and have them answer what you've already taught.
Mm-hmm. When does discharge, let's say you have a client in the hospital, you're a client that just came to your rehab facility. When do we start discharge planning?
On admission?
And why do we start it on admission, April?
Because when they come, you already like thinking about when they get ready to go home and what needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. So discharge planning starts right at admission. Okay, and that involves teaching all the way through, right? And patient education is one of our primary responsibilities. There's lots of barriers. Cultural barriers, language barriers, literacy barriers, maybe chronic conditions with hearing or vision or speaking. Or understanding. What if they've had a previous TBI or any kind of a brain injury? How do you assess what they can handle, what they understand? Okay. So that's patient education. What do we want to add to that? What else is important with patient education? What about educating the family as well? You guys are quiet today. What else would you consider in your patient education plans? Is there anything we didn't touch on? What else would you consider? What about the when and the where? Do you base it on the client's needs when they're feeling comfortable? What if they want to do some research or talking to other people before they do an education program? Is that okay? Sure. What else? What else? I'm sure you're all involved in patient teaching. If you're out in the working environment, what kinds of things do you consider? Or what kinds of things do you see?
You have to make sure that they're motivated to learn too.
Absolutely. If they're not, how do you get them motivated? We talked about this with the rural population.
You could do like clinics or stuff like that so they can see what needs to be done as far as their health and health clinics and different things.
And also, in order to motivate them, they have to have an understanding of what's going on. Right? If it turns out to be a high blood pressure, a blood pressure screening at a health fair, and they have high blood pressure, they have to understand the risks of untreated high blood pressure.
And I do sometimes think that sometimes you have to like get on the patient's level as far as explaining things to them, because they might not know like some of the medical terms and they might not know what they mean. So explaining it in a way that they will understand is helpful.
That's perfect. What else? For those of you that do patient teaching, what else? What other strategies do you use when you're considering how to accomplish your education? Okay, you guys are usually my verbal group, so I'm surprised. I don't have a lot of participation today, but anyway, we'll keep moving forward. Okay, so today we're going to we're going to go to the quiz, and you guys are going to take the quiz ahead of time. That's what we're going to do, and then we're going to come back and we'll go through all the questions. But I'm going to have you take the quiz just to see how much you prepared for class, how much you got out of the last hour. But that's what the quiz is. And the quiz is about clinical judgment. So I want everybody to go to quiz 4. And I want you to take the quiz. We'll take about 10 minutes, take the quiz, and then submit it. And then we'll come back and talk about it. Okay?
Today we are quiet. I think some of us have exams after this, so that's why we are quiet. Some of us are quiet.
That's okay. I just like when everybody participates. I don't like to listen to myself talk all the time. That's okay. So go ahead and take quiz 4. I want to mute myself for a few minutes while you take it. How's everybody coming? I can see that people are still working on it.
Like halfway.
I only have a couple of you submitting it. So when you're done, if you're done, make sure you hit submit. Okay, we'll do about 3 more minutes. Are people done or are people still who's still working on it?
Me, I'm still working on it.
Okay, can everybody else hit submit? If you haven't submitted it yet, please. Dorinda, how many more questions do you have?
I have 5.
You still have 5 more questions?
Yes.
Okay. Dorinda, I'm going to start reviewing it with the rest of the class, okay?
Okay.
Okay. How'd you guys do?
All right.
Good.
Did you do all right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. 1 second. Let me just get a quick update here. Shantari's going tonight. Timberlake, can you submit yours? Okay, let's have a look
I
at.
submitted.
Oh, did you? Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, let's have a look at the questions and go through them. Okay. Number 1, which statement is true regarding children and environmental health hazards? What did you guys pick?
Their
B.
proximity. Yeah, B. Basically.
And why? Why is that the right answer?
Because they're short.
Yeah.
All the other ones are wrong.
Right? Remember we talked about they put everything in their mouths. Right?
Yeah.
They're picking up everything. And the other answers are incorrect, or they're not correct. It's actually the opposite. Okay, question number 2. During a home health visit for a pregnant client, the nurse notes the client's husband regularly uses pesticides at work. Which nursing intervention is priority? Keyword.
A.
Yeah. Why is A the correct answer?
Because he'll be bringing a pest. I mean, if he don't remove his clothes and he's just bringing it into the house, and she shouldn't be handling anything or being around anything with that type of exposure because she's pregnant.
Mm-hmm. This is a good example of where you might get to a question and some of the other answers look like they could be correct,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so what do you do if that happens?
Think about it says priority.
Right, you got to go back
In
and
that
reread
case,
the.
this question kind of tripped me up because I was thinking like maybe the priority is to assess her because maybe she already got developmental issues from the pesticides.
Is that information in the question?
No, but I don't know.
But what?
I just thought that the priority would be patient, like making sure that they okay.
Okay.
So it was kind of a tricky question to me.
Okay.
Because I was really going back between A and between C because I'm like, I feel like both of them is a priority, but I felt like the priority lays with like making sure that nothing is wrong with her first. And then after you make sure nothing is wrong with her, then you make sure that she tell her husband to leave the stuff outside. I just thought that the other one was priority over.
Can we help? Why is A the priority? Because if they minimize exposure, then C is not going to be an issue or may not be an issue, right?
Right.
Yeah, but I feel like that in here it say that he regularly used pesticides at work, so that means that he always been coming home like that, so he haven't been removing his clothes. So I feel like that the priority lied with making sure that she was okay, and then maybe afterwards, then giving her some interventions on how she can prevent it from getting in the home. I just thought that it was like a safety question, like her health is a priority. So
right. And so you just kind of answered your own question of how can we help her reduce her exposure? Well, one of the first things is to have him take off his clothes and outside, not let his wife handle them. So you have to think about the information that was provided in the question. Anything that's not in the question doesn't exist.
But it say client husbands regularly uses pesticides at work, and it don't say that he have been removing his clothes and leaving them outside. So that leads me to believe that she's been around it already.
I agree with she's saying that he's regularly using it, so he's been coming home. But I picked A because it says remind him to remove it. Like even though she probably been exposed because he's been using it, but just remind him that he shouldn't be coming into the house with pesticides because he do handle them. And that would prevent her from any more exposure.
I just think that this question is just tricky because like I feel like that both of them can be a priority,
Okay.
I don't know.
No, excellent. Hang on. No, thank you for your feedback. Because I adjust the quizzes every term, so I'll take that in. I'll look at that for next term. The home health nurse works in a community with high rates of complex chronic illnesses and neurological disorders. Which environmental characteristic is priority?
C.
Why is C the priority?
Because all of the stuff from the plants get into the river that people would be in or eat fish out of or anything like that.
Mhm. Does everybody agree with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why is B wrong?
Because it's
It's supposed to be-
houses before 78.
Yeah, not 92.
Okay. Yeah. The nurse is reinforcing education about the diabetic client. Which statement indicates a barrier to learning? So what are we looking for here?
Like resistance or
What's hindering
Something
them from
negative,
Yeah.
something negative.
I picked D.
Mm-hmm.
What did you guys pick?
D.
Why is D the correct answer?
Because he's not willing to try something different.
Well, not so much something different, but something that's going to help manage his diabetes.
Doesn't want to do the diabetic diet.
Exactly. All the other three are good things. They're not barriers, right? Which nursing intervention will enhance the learning for a client who speaks English as a second language? We just talked about this in class.
B.
B.
Yep. Why is A wrong?
Because the recording is probably still in English.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Why is D wrong?
because it's probably in English.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the only answer that makes sense is B, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Home health nurse is reinforcing education on the use of a glucometer. Which approach would be most effective? Another key word, most effective.
A.
A.
Anybody else have a different answer besides A? Why is B wrong?
Because you still don't know if they could do it. They're like you still don't know if what they read or if they understand what they're reading in the pamphlet, if they actually are doing the right thing when they use it.
Mm-hmm. And it's not so
Or
much,
they may not know how to read at all.
Yeah.
Right.
you know, B, C, and D could be ways to reinforce education, right? But the question was asking which is most effective.
Yes.
Does that make sense? So here's another
Yes.
question where you start to read some of the answers and go, well, I mean, some of these other ones look okay. Got to go back to read the question and figure out the word you missed, which would have been most. And we know that the teach back method is the most effective one. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Does everybody agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Home health nurse is reinforcing education with an 8-year-old with type 1 diabetes. Which approach will be most effective?
A.
A.
Why is B wrong?
Because they have short attention spans.
We're looking at development here, right? 8-year-old. What is their what is their, where does their development say? They can't handle long comprehensive sessions. Why is C wrong?
Because you need to teach the child too, not just the parent, because the parent may not be teaching the child. So you can teach the child.
Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, coming to you from the schools, there are 8-year-olds that are independent in their diabetic care. Yes, we supervise them in the schools, but there are 8-year-olds that want to give their own insulin. They want to do their own doses in a pump. Yes, we double check them, of course. But one of my other students said they're too young to learn. That's actually not true. An 8-year-old is very capable of learning to start to manage their diabetes independently. So yes, we want to include the parents, of course, but we need to include the child. And then D is wrong because we don't know their reading comprehension. Right?
Right.
Which nursing intervention is a priority for the client who is not motivated to learn?
D.
Everybody, did anybody pick something other than D?
I
I
picked
picked C.
Okay. Okay. What's the important word in the question?
priority.
So what, in every client interaction, in every client relationship, what is the first thing we need to do?
Establish a rapport.
Gain that trust.
Trust. Right?
But I felt like the key words was a priority, but I felt like the priority, because it said motivated to learn, it was like focused towards the aspects of learning. And I felt like the only way he'll learn is if you like choose a style that's, a preferred learning style that's tailored to his. That's why I picked that one. I don't know. But I felt like that the way the question was worded, I looked at priority, but I looked at the whole question.
Okay. That's fair. And what we meant with that question was, what's the first thing that needs to happen in any client relationship? Right? Establishing trust and rapport. But I can see where did anybody else pick C?
I did.
Yeah, I picked C.
Okay.
But I picked D first, then I went back to C, so I'm mad about it.
Hey, the occupational health nurse is caring for a client who reports lower back pain is worse at the end of the workday. We talked about this in class. Which nursing intervention is priority?
B.
B.
D.
Right. Why is A wrong?
Do you want to try to help him to prevent it, not just go get a massage after he's already hurt?
Right. And here you're recommending therapy.
Right.
That's tertiary.
Right. And also, wouldn't you be wanting them to check with their own physician before you suggested anything like go get a massage or take this kind of medication, or you need an expert medical evaluation? Is that really up to you?
No.
No. When in doubt, always refer the client back to their physician, right? So absolutely B is the right answer. And then your last question, which statement is true regarding the scheduling of client education?
B.
B.
And why is B the right answer? What's going to happen when the client is most comfortable?
They're more susceptible to retain or accept whatever you're saying when they're in a comfortable environment.
And however they prepare to be comfortable is their own choosing. But a client who is comfortable to learn, or when they're comfortable to learn, is a good time to do the teaching. Not in a rushed way when they're running out the door, to be discharged. I know when I just had my recent back surgery, the nurse on the day of discharge, that's exactly what she said to me in the morning. Said, you're going to be discharged today. Let us know when it's a good time to go through your discharge instructions and go through everything to prepare to go home. Maybe you want to take a shower first. Maybe you want your husband to be here to hear. But she made it clear, let me know what the best time for you is. So, yeah. So can you see, the quiz is clinical judgment. Can you see that?
Yes.
Quiz is taking your knowledge and applying it in the clinical setting, or applying it in the clinical setting could be a client's home. Right? Applying it, how about I say it this way? Applying it to practice, wherever that might be. The hospital, the urgent care, the clinic, the rehab facility, the home, the community center, where the education is happening, the senior center. Okay. Questions? Has this been helpful today?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So go back to your study guide in the next couple of days while the information is still fresh from this week. Go to those parts of your study guide from week 6, review that information. Make sure you understand it. And what I would essentially do with the study guide is start by going back through weeks 4 and 5, and even this week, and, highlighting, yes, we went through this. Yep, we went through this. I understand that. Nope, but I don't remember her going over that. Or, I had to take a 10-minute break to go do something. I missed that. But use your study guide as your resource, as kind of your starting point. Okay? And then if there are areas on your study guide, because now we've covered basically the whole study guide. If there are areas on your study guide that you're comfortable with, check it off. If there's areas you're not comfortable with, go back and review your notes, your weekly notes we send, PowerPoints, your readings, whether they be in the book or the modules. Okay, and just make sure you're comfortable with all of the information. I'll send out my recording. Please watch my recording for the exam review, please. And then we'll go from there. Again, if you're preparing adequately, you should be confident going into the exam. You guys will be fine. We covered a lot in these 3 weeks, a lot. Okay, but the study guide is a good summary of the knowledge expected for you to know with the exam to apply it. Okay. Questions?
No.
I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Please
Thank you.
please reach out if you need anything.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. Reach out to me next week if you're struggling before the exam. Don't wait till after.
Okay.
All right? Okay. You guys have a
Thank
good
you.
weekend. Good to see everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.